listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
And welcome to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Dave Ross, Geoff Schwartz, here with you on a Monday. Geoff, I can't believe it. 3 days away from the NFL draft. We've been talking a lot about it. I know you have as well, across many different media outlets here. What is this time like for a prospect 3 days before? Obviously, you can't do anything else to prove that draft stock, or can you really at this stage?
Well, you can hurt your draft stock, right? Laramie Tunsil, very clearly, that's about all you can do, I think. I mean, Lyle Collins, unfortunately, right? Remember, his draft stock got derailed there with a false accusation of a real bad crime. So you can only go down, in my opinion, right? I mean, the medicals are all done, right? So everyone's had their medicals in. There's no more workouts this week. So everyone, that's in the bank. And I think we're seeing this week. And look, the only information we get is from teams are doing press conferences this week, right? Like pre-draft press conferences. You're not going to get much from that. I mean, you might get a nugget here and there from a coach, from a general manager or coach, but not really. It's just NFL insiders sharing information. And I think the one thing that we're seeing right now is that no one knows anything because this draft is very unpredictable. So, because there's like 6 premium players, right? And I'm not even sure Cam Ward's considered one of the 6 guys. You look at Genty, obviously, and we'll talk about where the rumors about him, and you look at Carter and Hunter and Tyler Warren, and there's some tight end movement as well. Like Cam Ward might be one of the 6, but we'll see. So my point is that a lot of guys sort of that are thinking they're going to be drafted 15 to 40. If you're one of those players right now, you're like, hey man, could be a first round pick, could be a second round pick. And there's probably some anticipation, some nervousness, some anxiety about what's going to happen on Thursday night. If you're one of those players in that position, I was a 7th round pick. I don't have to worry about that on day one, but there's probably a lot of excitement for the players right now. Excitement for the teams to get this process started. They've spent months, man. They spend so much time, and they go through every scenario. They run their own mock drafts. They obviously have scouted over 300 players. So I think teams are excited to get to Thursday, get the process started.
Let's get to those NFL offseason moves, presented by Smirnoff, the #1 vodka in the world. Please drink responsibly when you do so. But you mentioned it. There's a lot of smoke going on out there. The GMs are speaking this week, but it does feel like, for the most part, we have a pretty good idea of what names they might run up to the window, at least in the betting markets, is what it's telling us here. 1 through 5, all the way through Jacksonville 5. We went through the top 10 last week, some of the needs that are out there. But Ashton Genty feels like that one guy, Geoff, that maybe we're not exactly sure. Is he 6 to the Raiders, 10 to the Bears? Does he slip, or does somebody else jump up to try to get him? Now, he did put something else out there. It was basically an open letter to NFL GMs. And I want you to hear this, Geoff, and tell me what you think. He said in that quote, "If you pick me, it's simple. I'm coming to your franchise to do what Saquon and the Eagles just did. I'm coming to win big soon. It's tackle, all caps, football." You know what I'm saying? I draft the guy they can't tackle. It sounds great. I'm moved by it. Does it do anything for you, Geoff?
So, Dave, we haven't worked much together, and hopefully get to work over the years more and more. But you'll learn from me, like, I am anti-sentimental. Like, none of this stuff means anything to me. My radio partner for 6 years said I'm like the most unemotional person he's ever met. Like, it does nothing for me. I mean, he's a good football player. He's a great football player, an elite football player. He's a fantastic player. Him writing an article saying, I'm going to be good in the NFL. I mean, I hope he thinks that. I hope he thinks he's going to be Saquon Barkley. I want my players that I'm drafting the first round, really anywhere, to have that confidence and ego. I always find it interesting how not me, but we quote unquote knock players for having egos that are drafted in the first round. I mean, right? Like, that's what I want. Now, of course, there's a little bit too extreme of that. But I want the players that I draft early in the draft. They're supposed to be players that are impactful players immediately to help you win Super Bowls. I want Ashton Genty to think I'm the best player in the draft. You need the attitude to be good in the NFL. He might be the best player on a big board. I think there's plenty of people you ask right now that there's grading players 1 through 300. he's number 1 or number 2. He's that good of a player. But it comes down to, positional value, right? And the team needs at the top of the draft. And I think best player available is certainly a great way to draft once you get sort of out of the top 10, maybe even in this draft after the top 5. But there are teams at the top of the draft that need positions that you can only get right now, essentially. So look, I love that he wrote this, or someone wrote it. I don't know who wrote it. So it's been written by someone. And I'm sure he believes every word that was said in what was written. But I love the attitude. You should have attitude, but it doesn't move me at all. I'm not going to draft him or feel any different about Gentry because he thinks that he's going to win anywhere he goes.
I'm with you. And again, we're hearing a lot of this, and some of this is going to be smoke. And obviously, as you mentioned with Gentry, he's lobbying to be a higher pick, and that's going to work out well for him with his wallet. If he's a top 5 pick versus a top 10 pick versus, we know how all that slating goes there. Andrew Berry, the GM of the Cleveland Browns, and look, you look at the betting markets here, you're seeing Travis Hunter as high as -$9 to be the second overall player. That's where the Browns currently are slotted to pick. He was asked about him and whether or not he could be a two-way player. Because if you remember, Hunter said, if I can't play both ways, I'm going to stop playing football, which was, I don't know if he means that by heart, or a very odd thing to say. But Barry, if I can just kind of paraphrase here, basically said, we're not going to tell him he can't, but we're drafting him as a wide receiver first, and then maybe defense later on down the road. Is this really going to be an issue for player in whatever team, if it's the Browns here, that he wants to do something that maybe the league is saying or the team is saying, man, we need you to be this guy, and we need you to be the best this guy wide receiver. And if you're playing the other side, we think it's going to detract from why we're drafting you potentially second overall.
I think the discussion around his position is very interesting, because I think if you would have had this conversation 2 months ago, which I'm sure we all did, I think the consensus was he's a cornerback first and then a package of wide receiver plays, because that's the best way to use him on both sides of the ball. Again, I'll reiterate what I've said. Maybe I said this last week. I don't remember. His Colorado tape, right? What he was asked to do at Colorado was simple, right? He was clearly a full-time cornerback and a part-time wide receiver. Now, he won the Heisman because of his wide receiver play, but that wide receiver play doesn't translate to the NFL as far as what he was asked to do. Can he make those elite plays? Absolutely, right? The ball in his hand is elite, but he actually didn't do much quote-unquote wide receiver stuff. He lined up on mostly one side of the field for an entire game. He didn't run a ton of routes. He didn't run a lot of routes that are like NFL routes. He's just such a good athlete, was able to find open space in the field, and Sanders looked for him a lot, that it went really well. And that clearly shows you that he was a full-time corner, which he is an excellent corner, and then a part-time wideout. That's the way it has to be. You cannot be a full-time wide receiver and a part-time corner. It's not going to work like that in the NFL. And the Browns look at it as, look, man, we'll tell you what you want to hear. And when we draft you and you're under our team control for 5 years, you're doing what we tell you to do. And I love the attitude of saying, I'm going to play both ways. It's just not possible. It's just not. The corner and a package of wide receiver plays is certainly doable, but wide receiver first and corner second is not manageable. You can't do that because of the complexity of NFL defenses. You can have a package of wide receiver plays and play corner. You can't do the opposite direction. You can't split your time in practice. Play one position is hard enough in practice. Playing two is just too much. And he's gonna have to figure out, and he might figure out immediately the first NFL practice, like, man, doing both is a lot. It's a lot of running. It's a lot of work. And I'll just focus on being the best wideout I can be.
That to me, and you kind of heard John Harbaugh allude to it in Baltimore. He obviously, they're not in a position, it looks like, to move up to get a Travis Hunter, but he said, we don't want to tell him he can't do it. He can't do it, but we don't want to tell him he can't do it. From playing this, and other guys do. And I know Deion Sanders, he's obviously Shador's dad. He did play both ways a little bit to a degree with the Cowboys, who played some wide receiver. But to your point, he was a full-time corner, one of the best we ever saw. And then he did a little receiver. This will be the opposite of that, being a full-time receiver and then doing a little corner. I know Deion says that he can do it. I know that's his son's buddy and all that, but I'm kind of with you. I think he's going to find out that they're drafting you to play this position. That position might be a receiver.
And he's also not thick build, so like, I think if you were to ideally pull this off, I think you'd want a player that maybe was like 210, like 205. I'm not saying he's too small. I think he's perfectly sized for what he is. But like, guys, it's a lot of wear and tear, man, to play both ways, especially if you're going to go in a corner and tackle. And like, what if your defense requires you're a cover 2 defense, you're a cloud corner, like you got to be down there to tackle. You're going to tackle running backs like Ashton Genty and wide receivers and tight ends, and then be asked to go play full-time wide receiver when you get tackled a wide receiver too. I just think the physicality of the sport makes it really hard for a player like Hunter to make it happen. Now, is he one of the best athletes to try? Absolutely. But to me, it's just not feasible.
And very quickly, though, and you mentioned that 5-year control. That again, the betting market saying -$9. It's going to be Travis Hunter second to Cleveland. We'll find out. Maybe there's a trade in the offing. But if you're Andrew Berry and you're having those conversations, or you're hearing those conversations, clearly you guys are talking. If you're Travis Hunter and his agent with Andrew Berry, does that become a sticking point? That can't be something you just beat around the bush. Like that has to be addressed, right, before you draft him second overall.
I guess. I mean, okay, here's the alternative. Are you not going to play football? Like, I mean, that's the alternative. I mean, now that's obviously one harsh way to look at it, is say, okay, well, I guess you're not going to play football in the NFL. I mean, like at some point, you have to be a grown up and just like accept this is what it is. I'm not saying that he's not that way, but yeah, again, saying one thing like he did is different than the reality of what his situation is. Again, I like him saying, I want to play both ways. I want to be the field all the time. But the reality is you're going to go to Cleveland and play one position. It sounds like wideout. And if you don't accept that, that's a you problem. I mean, like that's just what it is. The Browns will draft you play wide receiver, and they want you to do that. And I'm sure, I think actually when it all comes down to it, he's just going to do it because that's his job. And he's going to just like it. He'll like playing wide receiver. Like that's what's going to come down to.
And I think you're spot on. 2 months ago, this sounds like a completely different conversation for position for Travis Hunter, particularly second overall. When we come back, let's talk about the third overall pick of the Giants. Are they still in the bidding for a quarterback?
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We continue the GM Shuffle, presented by VSiN and DraftKings. The crown is yours. Geoff Schwartz, Dave Ross here with you on a Monday. Geoff, love these conversations, especially from somebody who's been there, done that. And you know what this time of the year is like. I'm wondering what the Giants are doing. And they're going to be at 3. And again, Joe Schoen, I got to think Brian Daboll, front office head coach. I never, Geoff, root for somebody to lose their jobs. That's not my position to be in. But I think the fan base there in New York, New Jersey, if they don't turn things around this year, I wonder if they are on borrowed time this year for the G-Men. Joe Schoen's come out and said that it's not mandatory that we draft a quarterback here, because in the offseason now, they've gotten Russell Wilson and they've gotten Jameis Winston. If they don't go quarterback necessarily at 3, right? And right now the odds board will tell you that they're not, that they're probably going to go Abdul Carter. He's the overwhelming favorite if he's there at 3 to go to the Giants. What do you make of those comments from the GM? Is that smoke to say, you know what, good in the quarterback room? Quarterback room's good, man. We don't need to draft one of these guys. Or do you think he's being truthful?
I think he's being truthful, and it's not really his words that are, to me, that show that. It's the actions of what they've done to make the quarterback room whole for the season. They signed Russell Wilson, they gave him starter money. They signed Jameis Winston, they gave him backup money. Those are 2 starting options. You're probably not drafting a young quarterback in the first round and having 3 quarterbacks in that quarterback room. Right now, Winston's easy to get rid of. But again, like, who do you give the reps to? How do you make that happen? But I think this shows you again that this draft class for quarterbacks is just not very strong, right? I mean, the Giants would have loved to draft a quarterback at 3. But if Cam Ward is gone, I thought all along the Giants would trade up for Cam Ward, but it seems the last couple of weeks got off that opinion because it seems just unlikely the Giants are going to trade that pick. Because Shedeur Sanders is not viewed around the NFL as a guy for some teams that is a must draft. The Giants look at it, I would imagine, say, look, we have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. We can draft the best player available as with the 3rd pick. and maybe we come back top of second round if we want, and we like Tyler Shuck or we like Quinn Ewers or Jackson Dart's still there. Maybe we take a flyer on one of those guys, or we just get another best player available. Maybe it's an offensive lineman. Maybe it's another guy, in our secondary, a wide receiver. Like, they have holes to fill that they can fill in this draft without doing quarterback. And you're exactly right. If they don't win this year, those guys are out. But here's about the Giants. Their schedule's hard this year. They play I think the AFC West. It's a tough draw. But they were 1-8 last year. I believe that's correct, in one score games. Just by law of averages, that's going to be back to 500, most likely. It's simply what happens. That gets them like 7 wins. Like, they can win enough games, I think, to save everyone's job with the quarterbacks they have in their room if they add better pieces. I think the fun part about the top of this draft is this, right? We know Cam Ward's going 1. Travis Hunter's a big favorite. Abdul Carter's a big favorite to go 3. Will Campbell now is a huge favorite to go 4. I think it's worth, if you feel this way, if you have a little extra laying around, I mean, sprinkling, I think Carter 2nd and Hunter 3rd. I mean, I think that's the only plays you have available right now. Maybe they switch on draft day, right? We've been so big into Hunter going 2. They certainly can go 3. And then obviously at 4, maybe the pass choose another offensive lineman, not Will Campbell. But it's certainly possible the Giants would. I think the Giants would love Travis Hunter over Abdul Carter. They have a need for Travis Hunter more than Carter. But if Carter's there at 3, they have to take him.
What's also fascinating is what you're kind of getting at here. Certain teams about best available versus positional need that they have, right? That's that conversation there at 2 and 3. Yeah. The Chargers aren't drafting until 22nd because they made the playoffs. Joe Ortiz, the new GM, year number 2 with he and Jim Harbaugh. So really good year number 1. He said this as the GM, quote, "You let the board come to you. You don't feel the pressure, so to speak, that, oh, we got to address this player. We have to take this position. I just don't feel that way because of the way we have spread ourselves out in free agency and adding to the roster. In reality, it's really complementing the roster." So he says, I think that's the goal, is that basically it's that two-headed approach of free agency and then the draft to supplement it. When you're drafting at 22, it's different than drafting in the top 5. Like, we all get that, right? But it's like, can you do it that way? Can you be at 22 and say, well, we're not going to go with just necessarily the positional need. We can let the board come to us because as a playoff team, we don't have a high pick. What do you make of that theory that he's saying we don't feel the pressure that we have to address this position? We've already done some of that in free agency.
I love this approach. Is the way I think you should do it. When you're drafting in the middle of the 20s or early 20s as they are, you'll know who's going to be there. So that's why you set a draft board. So it's why you go through the process of doing that. And the Chargers have many different options, right? Tight end, wide receiver, defensive tackle. Those are probably the 3 options they have in where they're at, most likely, okay? And so you say, look, let's attack free agency with a couple of pieces that we need to fill our roster because we don't know what's going to be there at 22. If my mind, you look at like a Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, but the reports are that he might go a lot earlier than that. That's sort of the Monday scuttlebutt, right? He might go earlier than that. So if he's out of the picture, is Ibuka there at 21 or 20? Was it 22? 22? Is Kenneth Grant there or Walter Nolan or sort of the defensive tackle potential? So you allow yourself the opportunity to just take the best player available. I think once you get out of the top couple of picks, best player available is the way to draft. How often have we seen where a team drafts best player available? You think to yourself, like, they don't really need that position. And then the player in front of them gets hurt. And all of a sudden that need is now a need and you haven't got to fill that job. So I love the approach of the Chargers. That's what you should do. And I'm curious to see who they target at 22 if the tight end is gone.
We did this yesterday or last week, rather. If you did not listen, go back, check out the GM Shuffle with Geoff and I a week ago. We went through the top 10 teams. So we've already specifically broke down those, premium draft picks. At 11, the Niners are drafting there. And this was obviously bizarre for them as a non-playoff team to be drafting this high at 11. We all get the injuries that they had. But now really they've changed the dynamic in the wide receiver room. It's going to look very different, obviously, with Deebo Samuel not there this year. We do assume that they're going to give that big money deal. Puka Nacua was speaking on that about Brock Purdy. And, looks like they're going to be able to $50 million, whatever that price range looks like there. How much of this at 11 do we say, I trust the brain trust of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch to get this right. And now all of a sudden, it feels like a pretty important draft, Geoff, for a team that was a non-playoff team a year ago.
Yeah, it's a curious draft for them, right? Because they're at 11, and I think there's certain possibilities for them. This is why best player available is so interesting, right? Because that could be a lot of different players. It could be Will Campbell. It could be one of these defensive linemen. It could be Derek Harmon. I think the earliest Derek Harmon could go from Oregon would be 11. Maybe they Calvin Banks Jr. Is there. Maybe Will Campbell or Membu drops all the way to 11. Like, I think the board is wide open for the 49ers. This is why your scouting staff, your front office, it's why they put all that work in for that big old board they got in the room, right? They list everyone 1 through 300. They put them by position. And when it's your turn to draft, you just turn to the board and you go, okay, well, we need Shamar Stewart. He's our highest grade defensive end. We need a defensive end. Here he is right now. So the Niners at 11, I think this is one team where I think you just don't wager on them at all. Like, I don't have a great answer for what they're going to do. It's a stay away team in the draft for me.
I talk about this with producing and obviously, when we host shows, sometimes you can bury the lead, right? We waited this long to get to not my team, not your team, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys at 12.
Of course.
I mean, you leave the Cowboys. You leave with the Cowboys, Geoff, to get ratings for every show you ever do. What do they do at 12? Because I know people will get to go, it's Jerry Jones is going to be the guy given this pick. But is it more Stephen Jones these days? And I think if we're being honest, Cowboys have drafted well. It's the other part, free agency, that I don't think they've knocked out of the park.
Yeah, they actually draft decently well, especially offensive line. They're really good offensive line drafters in the first round, by the way. Look, their director of player personnel, Will McCoy, and
He's
then
great.
Stephen Jones. I think they're more in charge than we give him credit for. I think Jerry just is easy to take the blame, and Jerry B's the only owner that does weekly press conferences too. Most owners don't talk once a year, essentially. So that's why he gets the blame for a lot of it. But I think at 12, it does feel offensive skill position, right? Wide receiver. If Genty's there at 12, I think that's certainly a possibility for them. Maybe cornerback if Johnson's still there or Barron's there from Alabama. But I think, like, you look at McMillan or you look at Golden, maybe Ibuka, maybe Luther Burden. That does feel quite early for Luther Burden, but don't count that out for the Cowboys. But wide receiver, to me, if McMillan's there at 12, I would draft McMillan.
It is amazing that basically the last couple of years they've gone through Hall of Famers to be, and Tyron Smith and Zach Martin, those guys now have officially retired. They drafted those guys and got the bulk of, I know Tyron went 1 year to the Jets, but really pretty much his whole career there in Dallas. Yeah. Zach, his entire career there. They've done a good job of drafting their replacements that are now second, third year guys.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that they can be at that level, but Geoff, they really have sneakily. They're okay offensive line.
Yeah.
You think that's what affords them the position to be able to go for a wide receiver or running back if they have to?
I think so. And this is what I was discussing with someone the other day who asked me, are the Cowboys to draft an offensive lineman, is that viable? And these are all good. These are first round wagers. I don't think you can wager on second and third round picks. And I think the answer is no. Think about what they've done. Tyler Guyton last year, right? Tyler Smith, BB Cooper. Cooper Beebe, not BB Cooper. I'm thinking of DB Cooper there. And Brock Hoffman has played well as well. And then Terrence Steele, like, they've done a good job of building the offensive line back up. I think, again, look at the offensive skill players. Right? I'm looking at their depth chart right now. We know CeeDee Lamb, and there's Jalen Tolbert, Jonathan Mingo. Okay, the next group of wide receivers is Jalen Brooks, Kavonte Turpin, and then Ryan Flournoy. I don't know who that you were. Sure. And then Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, or I think just sort of like, backups if you're hoping to get someone else. And even I can even make the case that you could get another tight end would be worth it. If Tyler Warren drops down there, I think having two tight ends is certainly worth a look in the NFL. So I think offensive skill is just a huge, huge need for them at 12.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings. Dave Ross alongside Geoff Schwartz here on a Monday, getting ready for the NFL draft on Thursday. Boy, did that come quickly here in the calendar, Geoff. And there are some interesting names and teams that we've been discussing here, kind of 10 and beyond. You say you look at the Colts down there at 14. And I know that right now, Tyler Warren is the guy that most likely, according to the odds board, is the favorite to be drafted by the Colts at 14. What's interesting is the draft positioning for Tyler Warren is 9.5. And it is juiced now to the over at minus 240, which could put that in play for the Colts if you follow that math logic there. But you might think the under could be in play at plus $1.85. Where could you see Tyler Warren being a good fit?
Yeah, I think Tyler Warren is certainly interesting because I don't know if teams all have him as the number one tight end. Well, we've seen some movement on Colston Loveland right now to be the first tight end drafted. It was like about 5.5 to 1, 5 to 1, now down to anywhere, I think, from like plus 200 to plus 300, depending on what book you look at. So we're seeing movement in that direction of Loveland. And the people are telling you that these mock drafts, like, hey man, Loveland's on a higher board than Warren. So I'm not quite certain that Warren goes one overall, first tight end taken. I have a Loveland plus 550 ticket to be the first tight end, so I would absolutely love if that was the case. But the landing spots for Warren seem simple, right? 7 to the Jets, 9 to the Saints, and then 14 to the Colts. That feels like where he's at. Now, the Colts have a question to make. If he goes 7, let's say, to the Jets, what do they do at 14? I think you just draft Loveland. I mean, I think tight end is a must draft for the Colts if they're there. If one of those two guys is there in that position. The other question that is, I think, here's the one I have. Okay. What if both tight ends are gone at 14? It's possible, unlikely, but let's say that. Is there a chance they look at a quarterback? I mean, is there any chance, or the Richardson, Daniel Jones thing is just, we'll let it play out for a year? Like, what if they really, really like Jackson Dart or Shadur Sanders? Like, what if they watch, they're like, man, this is our guy. It's unlikely, but not crazy. We saw Atlanta last season. We thought Atlanta, no way they're drafting a quarterback. Michael Penix, we love Michael Penix. He's got the future. I don't think it's out of the question that they don't draft a quarterback. But it's worth discussing if they're there, the guys they want aren't there.
It is, Chris Ballard there as the GM. You can go through the carousel of quarterbacks since Andrew Luck left and retired suddenly, and what it's done. It's not on Andrew Luck. You want to stop playing, you stop playing. But they have not gotten it right, it seems like, for a lot of years, about 1 year guys. And then, Anthony Richardson, this is already going to be year 3 for a former top 5 pick at the quarterback position. So, boy, if Ballard did that, that'd really be maybe your final stake of like, I've got this right this time. I finally got the right quarterback. You mentioned Shadur. And right now, we're seeing the Saints, which team, the short number there is the Saints to draft Shadur Sanders at plus $1.95. This came on the heels, obviously, of the stunning news that Derek Carr looks like his season is over before it even begins in New Orleans with that shoulder injury, which is interesting timing that story comes out. What do you make of that? We all discount Shadur at 2 for the Browns, 3 for the Giants. And if that's the case, the next plausible spot would be 9 to New Orleans. What do you make of that? And if it's not 9, then how far could he possibly drop?
Look, man, it's hard to find anyone who covers the Saints who says they're drafting a quarterback with the 9th pick. I mean, like, and again, it's certainly not the be all end all that every reporter knows what's happening, but it's just hard to find a team that, or excuse me, anyone who's saying like Sanders is our guy. And I think that has to be considered here. Like, there's just no smoke of it. I mean, if you look at, you can go to websites that compile mock drafts, and like you look at people that cover the Saints, right? Will Johnson, Luther Bird, maybe that's a trade back. Mikhail Williams, just one Sanders, a Shamar Stewart, a McMillan, a Genty, a Membu, a Johnson, a Skirt. Like, there's not many even people that cover the Saints that are in on Shedeur. Like, it's just not. We're not seeing that now. Can they certainly go that direction? Yes, absolutely. But I don't think they're targeting Sanders at 9. And look, and the funny thing is, like, I think a lot of the Genty buzz right now to go 5 or 4 overall is teams trying to get other teams to trade up for Genty,
Sure.
right? Saying, oh, we're going to draft them because every team wants to move back all the time. I mean, that's what every team wants to do. There's not even like a smoke of like, come trade up to 9 to like Pittsburgh, come trade up to 9. Hey, do you want to trade back in the first round if you're one of these other? There's not even smoke of that. So I think Sanders is not going to New Orleans. And if that happens, doesn't happen, I guess, or does happen if he doesn't go there, then I mean, Pittsburgh at 21 feels like the next team that would be likely to take him.
Here's the bizarre thing for me, something I've mentioned on VSiN by the Book, shameless plug, weekdays here on VSiN. But quarterbacks to be drafted in the first round, Geoff, this number's coming down. So it was at minus 450 for 2.5 to the over that we get at least 3 drafted in the first round. This is down now to 360. That's almost $1 money move here in the last week. And maybe it's the potential slippage of a guy like Shedeur Sanders. I don't think we think he slips all the way out of the first round. But if you got the number 1 pick of the draft, looks like that's cemented, there's one. It still feels like to me, Shedeur will be a first-round pick at some point, whether it's 9 in New Orleans or elsewhere. But then how do we get that third one home? If Shedeur goes earlier, let's see. You don't think it happens?
I don't think we get. I'm not wagering on it, but I don't, because a team might just be trigger happy. I mean, look, the thing about this is we just don't know. Like, what if the Rams love Jackson Dart? We just don't know, and they say like we want someone to be the future of our offense after Stafford retires. It's Jackson Dart. I mean, look, it's certainly possible. We don't know what the Rams are thinking. They could think Jackson Dart's the best quarterback in the draft. And they want to take him at 24, 20, I think it's 24, somewhere around there. We just don't know that. That's why I think some of these markets to me are not playable in my own mind. But yeah, I don't think it's happening. We often use the phrase a team wants to trade back in the first round, draft a quarterback for the 5th-year option, right? So that example would be Giants, Browns, Saints, possibly. It like never happens. We say this all the time. Lamar Jackson, like that's it. Right? It doesn't happen. And the Browns and Giants are drafting 33 and 34. So why do they trade back up? The Eagles and Chiefs aren't drafting a quarterback. The Bills aren't. The teams from 21 to 32 really aren't drafting a quarterback unless, again, the Rams love Jackson Dart. I can make the case that they're like a win now mode. Let's go help out Matt Stafford, right? And help him immediately with the rookie. So that's why I think 2 is very likely. And 3, the third one probably gets drafted top of round 2.
Wow, you just walked me out of the lane 360. I appreciate that, Geoff. Marion Hampton,
because I just think it's so volatile, right? Like I think in this market, the only number I've laid over plus money, I think I took Membu to be the second offensive lineman drafted like minus 165. Everything else is plus money because I just don't think you could do it in this draft. I mean, yeah, if you have $100,000 laying around, you want to put on Cam Ward to go 1 overall and make a little bit of money. I mean, sure, you get some return, but it's just so hard because this draft and every draft is so fluid that it just feels like putting money on any favorite number here. It's just hard to do.
We mentioned the running backs, and this number it feels playable to me, and I want to get your opinion on it. Marion Hampton, his total is sitting at 19.5 draft position.
Yeah.
It is juiced heavily to the over. That does surprise me. The under 19.5, you can get plus $2.
This is the one that's always backwards, right? The over is drafted from
20 years later.
20 or later, and the under is the other way around. Okay. I mean, I think the first spot he's going is Denver, right? I mean, that's 20, right? Have that right?
Could you make it? Let's say Genty goes in the top 10, whether it's 6 to the Raiders, 10 to the Bears. Could the Cowboys be in play at 12?
what's funny is the Cowboys. Well, but here's the way you play that, right? You just take the Cowboys after running back at plus 800.
There you go.
Like that's the way to play that.
Yeah, that's just very smart way to.
You play individual. So I play individual teams to draft players or positions rather than playing the over under of the player, because I just think that it's not minus 110 each direction. I mean, there was one this morning like minus 600 for Loveland to be like under 17.5 or over, one of those two. Like they're insane. So just pick the teams you think are going to draft Loveland like that. Spread your money out, that way. So if you think the Cowboys are drafting Hampton, take the Cowboys plus 800 draft a running back.
And you mentioned with the Broncos feel like the perfect spot for him at 20 as a playoff team a year ago. Javonte Williams, ironically, is in Dallas now, leaving Denver. He's now in Dallas. It does feel like a glaring need there, and that's why the books have set this at 19.5 here for Hampton's draft positioning. My question would be if Genty goes earlier than expected. Remember 3 years ago when Jahmyr Gibbs, when the Lions traded way up, I think to 12 to draft him, and people are like, whoa, why do they do that? Who are they, bargaining against? And now we look back a couple of years later and go, boy, they wanted to get their guy. Could the Broncos do that, trade up higher to get inside that 19.5, say to 16, or to make sure they get Hampton and get their running back?
So there is, again, this Monday, as we record this on Monday, April 21st, this morning was basically like NFL Insider draft porn tweets. Like just every draft take possible was just out this morning, right? Like just like if you love draft takes, like this is your morning for you, okay? They all put them out on Monday. And one of the tidbits I saw from one of the insiders was the Broncos are calling around it to move up. And I don't know for what position other than probably running back. So maybe they do think Hampton's going sooner. I mean, they need this. The two most mocked players I want to say in this draft, any mock draft, is Cam Ward 1 and then Hampton 20. Like those are the two you've seen every mock draft. And I've certainly been guilty of that when I've done my mock drafts.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We continue the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside Geoff Schwartz here 3 days before the NFL draft. Geoff, it's been a lot of fun having you on for the better part of the last month leading up to this NFL draft. I asked you about linemen last week, what you're looking for in offensive linemen. Obviously, the GMs and coaches are looking for a lot of them because the total for offensive linemen to be drafted in this first round is sitting at 6.5, juiced evenly by the way, minus $1.15 either way to the over and or under. I learned this a long time ago as a novice who did not play football at the levels you played football. And I learned that the importance of building your football team from the O-line and the D-line. And I think GMs and coaches understand that before fans and even media ever do. When you see that total at 6.5, does that just tell you this is a position that we, like quarterbacks, we might jump a little bit at because you can never have enough offensive linemen?
I'm with you, but I've thought about this in my head about who these guys are going to be, right? So like, we just do the math on this, right? So you have, I think for certain, you have Will Campbell, Membu, Calvin Banks. Like those three are going the first round, I think, no matter what, okay? I think Connerly is going the first round as well. So that's 4. Okay. Then you I think Zabel, the North Dakota State, he's a tackle, but he's going to play guard center in the NFL. That's 5 for certain. That's, am I missing someone? Am I missing someone? I have 5.
Wow.
That I think are certainly going, right? Like that feels like 5. Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. I mean, it depends, I think, where you have him, where you're drafting. Josh Simmons from Ohio State is a maybe. So now we're at 7. That's it, probably. maybe the kid from Minnesota. I actually did see a mock draft today with the kid from Minnesota up there. But that's like if the Chiefs really, it comes down to really honestly, if the Chiefs love someone at 31, they have to draft. That feels like the tipping point between, is that Simmons? Is that Irsay? Like Irsay? Like is that? I don't know. So I would say probably under 6.5 would be my wager.
Well, I just feel like though, Geoff, with the Chiefs drafting, obviously the Eagles who had the last pick in the draft, the Chiefs got rid of all their offensive linemen, right? Like it felt like, all right, we got to get a new crop in here and start this thing semi over for Patrick Mahomes. I'd be stunned if they didn't draft an offensive lineman. It's the second highest position with that number at 6.5. The highest is D lineman / edge. Make sure they don't classify as linebackers if you're playing these markets. 8.5, Geoff. And this is juiced to the over at -210. So again, back to our adage of offense, you got to have, I know everybody talks running backs and quarterbacks and wide receivers. It really does start up front. And then defense, I know corners are invaluable to get, and there's not that many of them good ones to get. But boy, 9 is -210 to get 9 or more in the first round. Does that still feel like a placeable bet for you? I don't want to lay 210, but I understand the logic that we got to be able to get after these quarterbacks.
Again, like the Chiefs could be the linchpin for some of this because, look,
right?
I've contended the Chiefs should draft a defensive lineman for weeks now. They have offensive linemen that are young that they have to play. Okay. And so much focus was what happened in the Super Bowl on the offensive line. The defense line also did not touch Jalen Hurts at all the entire time. They need someone opposite Chris Jones. It's a very, very good defensive line draft. Worth noting, by the way, that this is true. Okay. You mentioned this. So a guy like Walker, who's going to be drafted in the first round, is listed as a linebacker, even though he's a pass rusher. So for the point of your wager, make sure your sports book makes that very, because that can be the difference, right? So again, like let's play the math game, okay? So Abdul Carter, Williams, Green, and Stewart, I feel very good going in the first round, okay? Mason Graham, Derek Harmon, that's 6 now. I think Kenneth Grant's probably going in the first round. That's 7. 2 more. Walter Nolan, probably 8. So like it does feel a little high, but teams I think are desperate for pass rushers. To your point, like, is James Pierce going? Is the kid from Boston College? So it does feel, that number does feel heavy, but think about the rest of the draft, right? Like you get 2 running backs and 1 quarterback or 2 quarterbacks. Like you got to start filling these positions up. It does feel like you just go pass rusher because you can never have enough of them.
And that is also a fascinating point. We start just doing the numbers count to get to the end of the first round. We mentioned running backs here, and obviously Genty and Hampton. I think those are locked first round picks. I never want to say lock, but it feels like it, that you couldn't imagine Hampton getting past the Broncos at 20, right? The total there is sitting at 2.5, and it is juiced heavily to the under at -240, which means Travion Henderson. I don't know that Junkin or anybody else is going to jump the line there. That it feels like Travion is that third guy in question. Plus $1.80, essentially, if you think Travion Henderson is going to be a first round pick. What do you make of that? That I don't know if running backs are now revalued, but yet the numbers say it might only be 2 in the first round.
Yeah. Well, again, you have to, I think, look at where a running back might go in the end of the first round. So if we think that Hampton is going, let's say 20 of the Broncos, do we know Genty will be gone by then? So we can just go, let's just go through the order. Okay. Are the Steelers doing a running back? Certainly possible at 21. They could do that, right? If Hampton's gone, they could surely go Henderson. So that's an option. Chargers feels unlikely. No Packers, no Vikings, no Texans, no Rams, no Ravens, no Lions, no Commanders, no on the Bills. And then you get to the Chiefs, who need a running back, but I just can't fathom that they take one at 31. Eagles don't need one. So you're looking at, again, like just the Steelers probably as a team that would do that. So in that case, again, you just look at go to DraftKings right now. A position for the Steelers, running back plus 700. Just do that.
Ooh.
Just take that wager, right? Like that. That's the way to do this. So, and again, it leaves you a little exposed if another team decides to trade up for a running back, which feels just like extremely unlikely. But again, do the teams. Okay, like the Chargers, probably not. Right? They have other needs. The Packers have a running back. The Vikings have a running back. Texans have a running back. Rams have a running back. Ravens have a running back. So not drafting one in the first round. The Chiefs could, but they just had Clyde Edwards-Helaire 4 years ago. They're not doing that again. Right. So I think that if you like a third running back to be drafted, it's Pittsburgh at 21. Just bet them to just take them plus 700. Throw pizza money on it. A tenth of a unit, a 15th of a unit, 20, a quarter of a unit, and put it on that.
I used to say when I wore a younger man's clothes that you could just get wide receivers. They just pluck them off a tree, right? There's so many receivers to be taken. And we saw that years ago. I don't know that that's the same draft model these days in 2025. Evidenced by the numbers that the number for wide receivers to be taken in the first round is set at 2.5. This used to be 5.5, 6. Yeah. I mean, wow. Has this number just shrunk in recent years? It is juiced heavily to the over still. You're looking at about minus 250 for getting 3 or more in the first round. But Geoff, it feels like, when you have the same number for 2.5, juice is different, but the same number of running backs at 2.5 and wide receivers at 2.5, does that tell you anything about the way the league is looking at these positions, or it's just a weak wide receiver class?
I think it's just a down wide receiver class, plus the needs of the teams in this draft are not wide receiver heavy. I mean, that's part of it, right? You look at the team again. I hate doing the same exercise, but
it's a good exercise.
But you look at obviously, McMillan and I think Golden are going 1 and 2 at some point, right? Or 2, whatever you want to look at it. And I think Emeka Egbuka is probably next in line. Okay, maybe it's Luther Burn, but again, you put exercise, right? Like, let's get to Seattle. 18 feels like the first one that might do it at 18. Okay.
Yes.
They need a wide receiver. Their O-line still a heavy favorite for them at 18. Tampa Bay, probably not. Denver at 20. If Hampton's gone, certainly possible, right? I think it's possible. Pittsburgh, no. Chargers at 22, possible. Packers, maybe. You see that there are teams that could take a third wide receiver. So I actually think over 2.5, that means 3, obviously, you're taking here, or 4, is a play. Would you say it was minus 250?
250. Yep. Not a terrible bet.
I told you I really don't like draft odds where I have to lay a little bit, but what's funny is like I'm okay laying 250 on other stuff if I feel good about it. But this one, I don't know. I actually don't think that's a bad wager.
I don't either.
Huh? And it's different than what I said about like individual team needs, because I think it's harder just to bet all these guys to have wide receivers. It's certainly playable. Rams at 26, maybe they look and they say like, we need Cooper Kupp replacement. So I think it's certainly possible. Yeah.
I'm with you. I feel like that's a very playable number here. I would look to lay the 250. And again, I'm with you. I normally don't advocate laying 250, but man, the receiver cores are so deep these days. Yeah, I think you could see somebody taking that and saying that we need more depth at our wide receiver position. About 30 seconds ago, Geoff, are we going to get shock and mayhem come Thursday night, or do you think it'll go pretty much close to the board?
The shock and mayhem, I think, only revolves around Shadur Sanders and Jackson Dart. Like, those are the two players that I think we could there be a player drafted in the first round that someone on TV has graded 88th? Absolutely, it's one of those drafts, but. I think those two quarterbacks are the real linchpins for wildness.
It's going to be fun. It always is on Thursday. I can't wait to recap it with you next Monday. So, Geoff, appreciate your time as always. Thanks, everybody, for watching the GM Shuffle presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours.